Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to a Fresh Stories book chat. Today I am overjoyed, overwhelmed, all the overs to talk to this guest. She has been creating content, changing the narrative, working her butt off to do this for many years now. And she just released a beautiful book. So I'm going to let her introduce herself. And then I have a million questions for her. So, who are you?
Who am I? It's a great question. My name is Libby. I am a mom of two. I live in Ontario, Canada, and I started creating content in 2020 when I was home during the pandemic with my kids and working part time and going to school part time and trying to juggle all the things part time. And I felt very alone. Like I struggled a lot in motherhood with various different things. And I thought, okay, well, TikTok is a place where I can share that and no one will find it because no one I know is on TikTok. Turns out lots of
Yep.
people found it. And it, long story short, became my job. So now I'm a full time content creator and author, speaker. I advocate for women and mothers to prioritize themselves and let go of shame and pressure to be all the things and do all the things. And yeah, I just came out with my book called Honest Motherhood. So that's the long and short of it.
Yes, I'm such a fan of your work and of your book and in awe of the work that you've been doing to really reach the audience that you have built and to touch base with everybody, right? To talk to everybody's story and to share your own story, which is not easy to do. I know also. So, where did the impetus come for writing the book, right? You've been creating content, sharing your story. Where did the book come out of that?
Yeah, so I started sharing in 2020 with no real plan. I mean, I didn't know that I could become a content creator or that I could make this my job. And then that did happen. And I loved being able to connect with women online. I amassed a very large following pretty quickly, a couple million followers in a couple of years. And I fell in love with being able to connect with women and help them know that they're not alone. And I wanted to change the narrative for motherhood that like we don't have to be, self erasure doesn't need to be the norm. Martyring ourselves doesn't need to be the norm. By prioritizing ourselves, we can show up better both for our kids and for ourselves. I was on a journey myself to unlearning a lot of things as I was sharing online. And I realized not only was I not alone in thinking that everything was my fault, that I was struggling so much in motherhood, but I realized that actually lots of women, like chronic burnout, depression, anxiety, mental health, struggling in motherhood is actually very common in mothers. And I wanted to make a change. The reason the book came about is because I got to a point with what I was sharing online where it felt like there's only so much you can do with short form media. You can help someone feel seen, or you can educate, or like you can do little snippets. I
Yep.
can touch on the mental load in one post, and I can talk about the gender division of labor and how that affects women's well being in one post. But I can't then make that connection to my own childhood trauma and how that made me someone who was a people pleaser and walked into every room asking everybody else, what do you want? What do you need? Who should I be for you as opposed to myself? And, I had all these different topics I would talk about, like, overstimulation or ADHD or the mental load or healing my trauma or being a cycle breaker, being things for my kids that I wasn't, giving my kids what I wasn't. And I wanted a way to tie all those threads together and say, hey, this is actually connected. The issues that you're having in your friendships as a new mom and the issues you're having maybe in your marriage or the issues you're having with choosing yourself or saying no or trusting your own judgment, they're actually all connected. And I don't want to tell moms this is what's wrong and this is how to fix your life. I had read enough prescriptive books on like how to fix your life. I
Yep.
wanted to tell my story and to sort of unravel my own story as to like, okay, how did I get to this place where I am filled with resentment and rage all day, every day? Meanwhile, I'm saying yes to everyone and everything and smiling. How did I get there? And then how did I slowly peel back the layers on, okay, how do I fix this? How do I figure out who I am, what I want, what I need, and be able to say no without wanting to peel my skin off? And
Yeah.
and I wanted to do that in a book because I can share context, I can share nuance, I can share the different layers, and I don't have to arrive at a this is what you need to do now. I can share my story
Mhm.
with you, and hopefully the reader can then take away from that. Okay, what does that remind me of in my life? Maybe what layers can I pull back in my life? Where can I be honest with myself? My hope is that by being honest, brutally honest about my own story and my
Mhm.
own tendencies and how society has affected me, that it encourages other women and mothers to be honest about their needs and their tendencies and the power they have also to change their lives.
100%. And I'm going to give you an example from my own life. I read your book, which is amazing. Recommend it to everybody. I'm very picky with parenting books, quote unquote, because I think most of them are bullshit. And as somebody that also has ADHD and trauma, I need a book that's going to reflect that. And so I just loved your book. I mean, I've loved watching your whole journey, which I want to talk about. But I will say, I read your book when it first came out, and I appreciated how much you talk about the rage and resentment, because resentment is not a phrase that we use much with parenting. And it gave me the tools to go into therapy last weekend and say to we have a family therapist who works with all three, my two boys and me. And I said to her, Whitney, I'm really starting to resent the kids. As my business is growing, I feel like they're holding me back, and I would never have said that openly if you hadn't written this book.
Hmm.
Fully, because it's so scary, and the both and between my kids are my entire world, I would literally do anything for them, and I wanna be really successful, right, and have a great
Right.
life,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's really hard to do, so I just want you to know, like, from my perspective, the book is changing lives, and the
Thank
work you
you.
do. Something that you do from a content perspective that's really fascinating to me is you've always used your body and physical nature
Mhm.
to,
Yeah.
engage people, which is a very, like, Dick Van Dyke thing to do, actually, and I think that there's been such a juxtaposition almost, this is, like, hard to explain. I'm gonna use my content as an example, and then you'll understand what I mean. When I post really deep things about, let's say, emotional abuse, I often will put it on the background of, like, a beautiful floral picture, and then I've had a couple people say to me, "This is really haunting," right? Because it's almost like seeing this beautiful picture, and then you're reading these really scary words. With your content, it's like you're letting this joy flow through you, and you're letting this, like, physical freedom come in, and yet you're talking about this constraint, restraint, resentment, the hard work of motherhood. And I think it's that juxtaposition that made people so fascinated by what you were doing, because you were being your full free self. Like, not many people have done that, like, all the positions and wackiness that you've done, right, on the internet. And yet you've opened up the dialogue for the really hard shit too. What started that journey for you? And I'm just so curious, like, from a content perspective of using your body in all of this content.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think humor makes hard topics accessible, right? It opens the door to, okay, this is a really hard thing. How can I make this feel a little bit lighter? Or how can I invite someone into a conversation who wouldn't normally engage with content like this, who wouldn't
Right.
normally be asking themselves these questions? And so there definitely is a strategy to, like, if I am silly, if I am free, and if I'm funny, that sort of just like lets people like relax a little bit, and it's also just engaging. Like I'm dancing like an idiot. You're going to keep watching, and maybe you don't want to keep reading about rage and resentment, but you're gonna because you want to see what the next dance move is. So
Yeah, but actually you
definitely,
make a really that's a really interesting point. You just kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I don't know if you were consciously or subconsciously doing this, but you did consciously provide a space for women to take a pause and then
yeah,
to be able to take the information in, which is really
yeah,
different than the content creators that come on board and they show you the blah, blah,
yeah,
blah, and you're like, "Whoa, this is, like, a lot for my brain," right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's so
I
much, and
love I
I
love
mean the
that.
thing is, and I would say that what really helped me to lean into that was starting on TikTok. I think that
Right.
if I had started on Instagram, which I never would over my dead body in a million years, because Instagram was a place full of curated moms who made me feel like I was an absolute piece of garbage. And so that is why I didn't like social media and went to TikTok instead. It's like the people on TikTok who were being authentic, who were being real, who were being silly, who were being human, they gave me permission to be what I already was. Like I was
Mm,
already those things in my real life. but they were parts of myself that I think I hid very often unless I was with very safe people. And seeing other people do it made me go like, "Oh my gosh, like I could do it like this." And it's similar to, okay, well, why write a book, where you're brutally honest about things? It's like my life changed when I read Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
Yep.
My life changed when I read Brene Brown's books. Hearing other women tell their stories and their truth out loud made me go, "Oh, wait, you're not crazy. Oh, wait, you're not the only one. Oh, wait a second. If they can be honest, then you can be honest. And if I know they changed my life, then I know that simply by telling my story, I can change other people's lives." And so those things are related because it's like we need often other people to be the first. Maybe, these other people aren't doing things in the same way as me. The people on TikTok aren't dancing in the same way
Mhm.
as I am. I'm not writing in the same way that Glennon Doyle's writing, but when other people show up truly as themselves, authentically as themselves, whether it's in a coffee shop or online or in a book, when they show up as themselves, it gives you permission to go, "Oh,
Yeah.
wait a second, maybe I can too." And that I think is what draws people in is like, it's this permission to show up as our multifaceted selves. Like, I am not, to some people on Reddit, I might be like depressing, doom and gloom Libby who only ever complains about motherhood. Like maybe that's who I am to some
Mhm.
people. But most people, the people who follow me and the people who like me and like my content and hopefully my writing, I think they're drawn because I bring most all parts of myself
Yeah.
to my work, and that I'm not just talking about the hard things, or I'm not doing it in a depressing way. I'll share my joy and I'll share my sorrow. And so, we want to see ourselves reflected in other people. We don't want to just look on Instagram and see the mom who's nailing it every moment of the day or see
Right.
someone who only complains. We want someone who can show up as their multifaceted self because it doesn't just make them more relatable, it makes you more open to hearing what they have to say as well.
100%. Now, how do you think that that's related to you being a cycle breaker?
Oh, I think there's a lot of ways that it's related to me being a cycle breaker. I mean, there's a lot of ways that I can answer this question. I grew up, I mean, for people who don't know, I grew up in a household with a single mom who had undiagnosed and untreated mental health disorders, like until I was an adult. So no help was being had there. And there's, different men coming in and out of our lives. I moved 18 times before I was 18 years old. There was a lot of instability. There was a lot of emotional dysregulation. There was a lot of me being responsible for a lot of things I shouldn't have been responsible for at a very young age. It's grocery shopping, it's cleaning, answering phone calls to creditors, all that, having yard sales to make enough money to buy bread, that kind of thing. And it made me someone who was resilient and could get things done and could spin all the plates. And I became someone who got my sense of worth from being able to do for others and to keep everything kind of in line. It also made me someone who is kind of like 2 things can be true. In one way, it made me more confident, where I could just do things that my other friends couldn't because they had never been
Mm.
exposed to having to be responsible.
Yeah.
But it also made me someone who is very on edge in my relationships, unsure of like, are they gonna continue? Can I trust this person? Can I lean on this person? All of that. And I think how it shows up in my content and what I'm able to share is it makes me more creative, right? When you have to be very independent from a very young age,
Yep.
you are primed and conditioned to look for solutions to problems, to see patterns, to be smart, to figure out, okay, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with the world? How can I adjust this situation so that I can feel comfortable and safe? And so you become very attuned to other people's emotions, very attuned to how to soften a room. You know, find me a funny person in the world who hasn't experienced trauma, and like I will give you a lot
Mm.
of money because it's like you become funny,
Mhm.
partly as a coping mechanism, partly, because it helps you feel safe, it helps you feel connected,
Yeah.
and so I think, my humor comes from that. I also think that my ability to talk about hard things is informed by being a cycle breaker in almost a sad way, in that because my family of origin is not a place where I go to for a sense of belonging. I don't have a deep sense of attachment. I don't have a, well, if I say this, I'm going to be ostracized because I don't really have that.
Right.
Yes, I grieve that other people have it and I don't, but also it allows me to say things because I'm not I don't have the same ramifications. I've already lost everyone. I've
Right.
already been independent. I've already been on my own. And so I think it sort of allows me to say things that other people don't feel safe to say because it's going to affect their relationships more.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I appreciate all of that honesty, and I very much understand what you're saying with the need to figure shit out, right, as you're going through
Mhm.
situations. Because quite literally, and I very much understand this, when you grow up in a household, you're having to navigate physical spaces, right, around
Mhm.
crap and people and things, and you have ADHD, but it's undiagnosed, right? It's like you're trying to figure all this stuff out, and it does make you a very good problem solver as a
Mhm.
parent and as a person. What did you learn
No,
about yourself? Yeah, I'm
I will
curious.
say it makes you highly efficient, but it also makes you prone to burnout, right?
Yeah.
It makes you I mean, what I share in the book is that I eventually realized that while I became someone who could spin all the plates and be reliable and be independent and overfunction and overcompensate and do all of those things, it also made me someone who was not attuned to myself.
No.
I could attune to everybody else in the room. I could figure out what they wanted and needed simply from the look on their face or the way they were sitting, but I couldn't even hear my own inner voice saying, "You don't have the capacity for that. That is actually not something that is important to you. If you say yes to this thing, this is going to affect your kid this way, which will affect you this way, which will affect this." I was so attuned to everybody else and not attuned to myself. So it's like while you're spinning all the plates, you're not even stopping to say, "Do I have enough arms?" While you're saying, "Put another plate on," you're not even stopping to say, "Have I ever carried this much before? How is this gonna affect me?" And so, it took me a long time to realize that I didn't even ask myself what I wanted, what I needed, what my capacity was. And so, it is this double-edged sword when you grow up parentified or when you grow up in a household where feeling safe and staying safe requires you attuning to everybody else is that, yeah, you can get a lot of things done, but you're more likely to end up burnt out with a chronic illness, with ADHD,
Mhm.
with an inability to focus, to struggle with executive function, to struggle in
Yeah.
relationships.
Yep.
And so it's like this duality that's really, hard to navigate. And that's why motherhood, I think, really brings a lot of women to their knees who have experienced the sorts of things that we've experienced because it's like you can spin all the plates and feel good about that until motherhood puts so many plates on that you realize I have to put something down. And putting it down feels terrifying because what is that going to mean about if people are disappointed in me and what's that going to mean about me?
Yeah, and the love that you have, right? And are these people
Hmm.
gonna keep showing up for you? I mean, that was my marriage for
Hmm.
sure, and I appreciate that you have a very different, take on relationships, and you have a very healthy, wonderful marriage with your husband, as it seems. And so, and I love that because I think that you are somebody that really did walk the walk through this journey, and with your spouse, and as a mom and a business person, and came out this other side. So, what was something you learned about yourself while you were writing this?
Mm. While I was writing, I learned that I mean, this one's not gonna be as deep. I learned that I can't multitask as well as I think I can. That is what I learned. I mean, I had spent 6 years training my brain to do short form content and to deliver information in little snippets,
Yeah.
and then having to go from really paring down what I'm thinking and believing and wanting to share into a small digestible thing into something longer, it was hard to then, like, change that, but then also try to continually make short form content at the same time and figure out what is actually realistic for a creative. Like, how do you write a book while maintaining a business? It was really hard for me to do that,
Yeah.
and to, like, switch my brain and to, like, figure out what my days actually look like and what it means to be creative and how much I needed to pour out versus take in and how, I think, when I started making content, I had so many experiences to pull from that I wanted to share about. 6 years, 4 or 5, 6 years into content, the content piece takes up so much of my life that I'm not experiencing life as much. And I learned that there really is a balance to being creative and that you need to be out there in the world interacting with people, seeking joy. Like, I am a driven person who wants to get a lot done and wants to pour out and wants to fix everything. But I need to pour into myself. And what I learned is how ironic it felt, and in some ways hypocritical it felt
Yeah.
to be writing a book about motherhood and about being present and about us mattering as individual people while giving everything I have to my book and my creative work, and realizing that, oh, wait a second, the lessons I'm sharing in this book don't just apply to motherhood. They apply to everything, to work life, to home, like to
Yes.
everything. And that
Yeah.
you cannot give your all to something. You have to eventually pour back into yourself. And that's one of those lessons I feel like I'll continually learn for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I love that about the book too, that you can apply those lessons to so many things like business and being a leader, all of that. I love it. So, one of the questions I like to ask before we let authors go, especially when you write a book like this, is if somebody's listening to this, Libby, and they're a mom, and they know that by opening your book, it's going to open Pandora's box to this next level of their life, right? Like they're doing all the things. They're fine. They're fine. They're fine, right? What would you say to somebody who sees your book and is, like, a little nervous to read it?
Hmm. I would say that you should be more nervous to not do the work. I would say that maybe you're afraid of, I think of it as like a spool of yarn, and I even talk about this in the book. When I first went to therapy, it was like I went to therapy thinking, "Oh, I'll just talk it out. I'll check that box." Of, "Oh, I went to therapy. I fixed myself. I can get back to spinning the plates." And what really happened was that I took the end of a thread of yarn and I kind of pulled it, and then there was more, and then there was more, and at first I was filled with fear. And so that fear is legitimate, and you feel that fear because, as humans, we desire a sense of stability, and the unknown on the other side is scary. What's actually going to happen? Am I going to change? Will that change my relationships? Like, that fear is real. And also, what is on the other side of that for you is a life that is true and real and allows you to show up for yourself and show up for your kids the way you want to, and it's worth it. And it also doesn't need to all happen at once. I have people message me all the time that's like, "I'm a cycle breaker," or, "I just realized I want to break the cycle," or, "I want to heal," or, "I want to change," but it's so overwhelming. And the more I learn, the more I'm overwhelmed. Then there's even more to learn. And I think I'm just learning this one thing, but it's connected to everything. And it's so much. And I just want to get better. And I've had those, dark nights of the soul as well. And what is true is that the next day the sun comes up and you actually can get better and that you can survive. You're going to have moments where you're like, you know, okay, maybe this is why I'm like this. Maybe I do need to change. And that feeling isn't just a constant feeling. It's a feeling that peaks and then subsides. And then you make breakfast and then you play Uno with your kids. And then you get to work and you do your work day. And then maybe the peak doesn't come again. And the learning is slow and you don't have to change
Mhm.
everything overnight. But if you don't take that first step, then you're good. If you're anything like me in my story, if I didn't take that first step, I would just be stuck
Yep.
on a wheelhouse of burnout and self shame and self blame, and like that is no way to live. And like you deserve to live in a place where you love yourself and prioritize yourself and cherish yourself, even if it means that there's going to be hard moments along the way.
Yes, 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 yes. Mic drop on that one. I love it. Where can people buy Honest Motherhood, Libby?
Yeah, you can buy Honest Motherhood pretty much anywhere you get books: Amazon, Indigo, Barnes and Noble, all places. So I hope you do. Hope you read it, and I hope you give yourself a lot of grace.
I love that. Yes, go read the book. We're gonna have to have you come back, talk about a lot more stuff motherhood, because you are just a wealth of knowledge and gems that you just keep dropping, and I could just listen to you speak all day. We'll put the links in the show notes, and we just appreciate you showing up in your true authentic self. It is not easy to be a content creator on the level that you are, and I actually have so many questions about just that side of growth because that's developing a public versus private persona is tricky. That's something that people don't talk about much.
That's true. Maybe that's my
Yes.
next book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's happening a lot more nowadays, but it's hard, especially when you're a parent and you
Yep.
have talk about parenting. So we appreciate you, Libby. Keep shining,
Thank
keep
you.
doing your thing, and go buy the book. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.